Hey guys, Henning and Morten from FlippedNormals here, and in today's video we are going to be looking at some of the effects and some of the, we've taken some stills from the new Spider-Man Far From Home trailer, so we thought we'd just do a kind of VFX breakdown and take you through how you would make some of these shots, like what goes into the production, and some of the silly things you would have to do in CG to replace stuff. I think it's like the first, after the Sonic video, this is like the first breakdown we've ever done of like these kinds of shots. So let's see how it goes.
Yeah, we figured we might as well use our area of expertise in VFX to actually some good here.
Yeah. So the first shot here is, these aren't chronological, but we've just divided them into like suits and stuff. So this is I think this is one of the first shots, actually. This is the Iron Spider suit. And I think we should just quickly mention there's a spoiler alert at the beginning of this trailer. So if you haven't watched Endgame, we'll just forward that to you as well. Probably don't watch this video because maybe we'll talk about some spoilery stuff from Avengers. But yeah, this shot, Spider-Man swings in. He's a full CG suit. And obviously Iron Spider is made of metal. Making stuff out of metal and making it move is not always the easiest thing, because you have a lot of deformation issues you have to deal with in rigging, especially. So, like, I don't know, like having an iron suit has always felt a little silly to me. Like, I feel like the Iron Man suit itself can work. It's very believable. When we have something that's this tight, like skin tight, having an iron suit is a tricky challenge. But I think, I don't know, I think the deformation that they did for this, and as well for the previous Avengers film, where they had the Iron Spider in it, I think they did it pretty well.
Yeah, it looks really awesome. One of the things which I hear a lot is how do you rig something like this? Like, that must be insane. And the question is yes. And how do you fix deformation? Well, you just kind of hope it works.
Yeah.
If you were to look at the Transformers movies, which is, I mean, they're in Transformers, they don't deform at all, but there was just intersection nightmare everywhere. But it's like, you're not making a mechanical thing, you're making a movie. So if it works in shot, then you're good.
You hide it in like motion blur, smoke, and fight scenes.
Some shot sculpting as well, probably.
Yeah. Like for a shot like this, where you have, this is not the most complicated to not have deform really bad, but you have areas like this, especially for the shoulder, where you see, like, in terms of the design, they've tried to help themselves. So these are areas where you would probably have, you would paint your weights in such a way that this sort of just intersects with itself. Like the shoulder would maybe go underneath the suit a little bit, just to help the deformation a little bit. But having a metal suit like this is just, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, and if you want to start doing something like this, let's say you're a student, you want to do a student film. First off, you shouldn't do it. But if you are going to do it, then find some real world reference. And the real world reference here would be medieval knights, because they've done that. They had very, very functional suits of armor which were used in battle. Yeah. So even if you're making a spider suit, you want to find something in the real world which has been done.
Yeah, you see, like this here is a great example because it's a very sharp shot. And what you have here, let's take the abs for example. You kind of have to cheat it a little bit. Obviously, there's going to be like this kind of membrane in between his abs, and that's going to be stretching a little bit. And then all these plates, they can sort of like slide a little bit, I would assume. But then there's probably also a little bit of like a fall off on the plates as well. So if he twists his body, these are going to twist, like shear a little bit in both directions, just to assist the deformation a little bit.
And you're just going to be using, well, he's a superhero, and he has a Stark suit, so
Yeah, it's made out of like amazing metal.
Yeah, it's metal, yeah, but it deforms.
Yeah, but it's Spider-Man.
It's Spider-Man.
Now this shot here kind of, I don't know. I was a little confused by this shot, because when you look at, like, if you look at the shoulders for this one, right? This is obviously the CG suit. This one here, I'm not so sure. I kind of think they had a real suit made. I honestly can't tell. If this is a CG suit, they've done an amazing job. There's a close-up that we're not showing after this as well, where the suit, it just, I don't know, the amount of detail and imperfection that's in the suit just makes me think that it's a real life suit.
It's so tricky to know as well, because they definitely made a real world suit for it, because you need to in order to actually make it in 3D. Like, well, you don't technically need to, but you need some reference.
Yeah.
You need, if you're gonna do this maybe across 7 VFX studios, like all the Avengers movie done, it's like all the studios, you want some real world reference, so that all of them, they're not just making like 7 different versions of the suit. You want some photographic truth into it. And so building a real world suit is going to help you massively to achieve realism into it.
Yeah, it's one of the really nice things is just for lighting reference and shading reference. You know, you have a real plate with the real suit in it. Then you set up some lights, and then it's a lot easier to match that lighting situation because now you basically have a one-to-one replica of what you're doing in CG.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's better, but it's good for modeling reference. So, like, yes, it is because you have to remodel it, but it was already modeled in 3D before it was built in real life. So they could have just used that concept sculpt for it. There are probably a bunch of these plates which are all done in 3D by a concept artist, and then they were taken and 3D printed out. So it's the 3D model you would already kind of have.
Yeah, and like, I don't know, this suit is just super cool. Not much more to say about that one. But this one, then we have the regular Stark suit. This is the one that I think Peter gets in like Avengers something.
Yeah,
maybe.
one of them.
Or maybe it's in the first Spider-Man film. I can't actually remember. But this is a cool shot because it gives us opportunity to talk about not something covered in metal where it has to be a little more rigid. It's a little more, like Henning said, it's like a knight. But with this one, you know, you have a lot more stuff. You have like everything's obviously rigged and stuff. Then you have muscle sim and skin and fat that's being simmed as well. Then you have the suit that's being simmed on top of the body to achieve these like super nice wrinkles as well. You had that from that the Spider-Man film with before. What was the Spider-Man film before this guy?
Oh yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, so like there's like a shot where he jumps off of a building and he pulls his arms back, and there's a lot of like
that's awesome.
Yeah, a lot of like what do you call it, suit simulation on top, and that really adds to the realism. Like it's really hard when you have a suit, a skin tight suit like this, and there's no flappiness or anything. Then it just looks like one of those like shitty latex suits that's on top.
It's in order to make a Spider-Man which looks at like 60-70%. That's not very hard. Like if you watched our one of most recent videos, which is actually making a Miles Morales, like in terms of actual modeling, the hard part is kind of like the pattern, the pure shape of it. He's very simple. Yeah. So the textures as well. Again, it's not an incredibly hard job, but if you want to take it to 100%, now you're doing what Morten said, where you need simulation on top of that, and that becomes a whole different game. So much harder.
One thing I think is also whenever there's a shot of Spider-Man's face, I think all those shots are CG because Spider-Man has such a stylized face. There are shots where Peter Parker takes off his mask, but they always start from like when he's kind of taking off the mask. They never show it, I think, full face and then to mask. If they do, the first is going to be CG because like you can't compress the nose really nicely. The ears are going to stick out no matter what you do. Like Spider-Man has a very, that like classic learn to draw faces face where it's just like a ball and like a thing for the head. So I think it's always CG. And then maybe sometimes they have like some real plate stuff in there, and then they definitely replace the eyes because they always emote. They can like open and close.
At least that's the nice thing about shots which are 100% CG. There is no, you don't have to like match, you don't have to composite in some CG eyes on top of a human character. There's no tracking of it, you just go. And we're also talking about the background here, where maybe the background here is photographic plate, or maybe it's CG. Like one of the reasons why you would do this as full CG is because you can't get a camera crew in the location. Yeah. There are times where you genuinely can't. Imagine you're filming on the inside of a volcano. Like you could go there, but
Yeah, this shot could very well be full CG. Yeah. But it could also be real, except for Spider-Man.
So Spider-Man.
Sometimes you just need extreme shots where it is actually cheaper and it's also more accessible to just do it in full CG.
Yeah, and it could be super dangerous. Maybe having a camera crew up there is really bad. I mean,
one thing I never understood is that, I don't know, I think there's like 200 versions of New York that's been built in CG. Yeah. Like I feel like New York in particular should be in like a main repository somewhere. And like a few studios should own it, and then you could sort of rent it or something. Because
you rent New York.
Like New York in CG gets built all the time. It's
and destroyed as well.
Yeah. Then there's the stealth suit, which is like later in the trailer.
So cool.
I don't know if this is like a mix of like the noir and some other stuff, but it's a pretty cool suit, and I don't know why he wears it actually out there. It's like now he's in Venice.
He's got to do some thieving.
Yeah, so it's always one of those things like, oh yeah, now Peter Parker left New York. Now there's no Spider-Man. Oh, Spider-Man happens to show up in Venice.
Yeah. And even if, let's say this is like if this were to be a real one or the background is real, I can imagine it's a set which is custom built for it.
Yeah.
One of the reasons could be that if it's not a set, then it's probably like a 500-year-old building, and you don't want a camera crew screwing around a 500-year-old building. Or I assume he's pretty high up in a place, and you definitely don't want to get a camera crew up there.
No.
And you just have so much more control if you're building the set.
Yeah. And also, like, so just to give you some background to what happened, Spider-Man was over here, he's like, and then he jumped and like did a salto, it's like a front flip,
Like a somersault.
and then he landed on this building. So all this stuff over here was definitely CG.
Yeah.
But what they could have done, to save on the CG or whatever, they could have switched him out for the live action one as he lands here on this custom built set. But it could also be full CG. That's the tricky thing. Like it's getting so good now that a lot of the time it's hard to tell when you have the mundane scenes whether it's CG or not.
Often you can know that it's CG just because of the crazy shit which is happening.
Yeah. But when it's like the more subtle stuff, like Spider-Man just standing in a kitchen, then you're like, is that CG?
Yeah, and then they've done a little sky replacement or something in the background, which you can't tell.
Then we have our first introduction to Mysterio. He's an interesting guy. So I think he's a hero in this trailer and not a villain. Like in the comics, Mysterio he's a villain, but this Mysterio is from a different universe because now Marvel has confirmed the multiverse. So everything that happened in Endgame, just ignore it, because there's multiverse. So there's Black Widow, she's alive. If anyone cares, in like another universe.
I really don't care.
And everyone's alive and it'll be great. And they'll like come over to like Earth 616 or whatever it's called. It'll be great. But this shot of Mysterio is actually interesting because we talked about Jake Gyllenhaal. He wears an actual suit like for a lot of regular shots. So they had like a real life suit built for him. And that could be this suit, or what they could have done, which they often do, is what Henning mentioned before. You have a real-life suit in the shot, just as lighting reference, or to reference for, like, how do we shade it and what do we do? What they often do is they take the CG suit, and then they just put it on top. So they comp it in, so, like, the CG suit is superimposed on top of the real suit, because it's a lot easier to adjust it. You can't really adjust the real-life plate. So that could very well be happening here.
It's so hard to do something in CG to look real if you don't have reference. That's something we talk about in half our videos. Get reference. This is something the VFX industry really gets.
Yeah.
Whenever you're doing any kind of digidoubles or anything like that, like you have scans of everything. When they're doing the 3D model of this guy here, they have a CG model of it. They have LiDAR of incredible photo scans of it with textures and everything. Because first off, it's 10 times faster to build.
Yeah.
But also then you have like a truth. You have like this is right and this is wrong. If you're just kind of winging it in CG, you're not really sure. Then it becomes a matter of taste.
Yeah.
And if you have a matter of taste, again, across 10 VFX studios and 200 supervisors and 400 lead artists, then you just get a huge mess. You want like a Bible for the look.
And like a good example there is Hela and Valkyrie from Thor Ragnarok. Like Hela, she wore it wasn't a motion capture suit per se, but it was like a motion suit. I don't know what the technical term is, but her entire costume was made in CG. Like it's full CG everywhere. And Valkyrie, she wore like a regular suit in the film, but they decided to replace it for reasons we probably shouldn't get into. But they fully replaced her, and like they did some things to the costume and stuff. So a lot of the shots with her, I don't know if it was all of them, she was replaced because you can tweak the suit in CG, you can make it look different. So it's cheaper than having to reshoot or
such a nightmare though to do it.
Yeah.
But it is one of the realities that having a crew of 4 or 5 VFX artists work for a few months is cheaper than doing reshoots, because then you have to get all the actors on set again. Like maybe the shoot is in Iceland. Imagine how insanely expensive it is to do an Icelandic shoot with 4 A-listers, and then it's going to cost you to do it on CG, but it's cheaper.
Yeah, like the fact is that the misery of CG artists is a lot cheaper than flying an A-lister to Iceland to do a reshoot.
Yeah, I was talking to a VFX sub recently who was saying that he just incorporated roto into shots. He wouldn't even bother to set up green screens because roto and prep today. Roto is just when you're cutting characters out instead of using green screen. It's so cheap and it's so good today that you might as well. They just budgeted in that they would do it because then you can replace the background, sky replacements, do all sorts of fun stuff with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of hidden CG that goes on to hide stuff. You know, the suit might very well be real, but, you know, obviously the dome is going to be a CG dome that they have on top. Can't have simmed clouds within, like, a bowl. And where would Jake Gyllenhaal's head go? You got some effects on top. And it's kind of hard to talk about effects when you don't have moving stuff.
Yeah.
But
effects usually doesn't look great in a single one. So you often look really good in motion, but it's hard to see them as stills.
Yeah, it's like with this shot, there's a lot of really cool effects in it. We just didn't know about the legality of putting video in our videos. So
we're keeping it safe.
We'll just stick to screenshots. But this is a full CG shot. Like here, Mysterio comes down and then he flies off like whew, the master of all elements or mystics or whatever he is.
It looks like a diver, like an old school diver.
Yeah, like Mysterio, especially in the animated series for Spider-Man, he's such a silly villain. Like he's like, I am Mysterio. He's really one of those like old-timey villains. And his motivations are always like, stop Spider-Man. Yeah.
I love those.
Like Mysterio is one of my favorite silly villains. Then we have this shot, which is like, it's one of those where you have hidden CG and you don't really know what is CG and what isn't. Obviously, CG, because we don't have holograms.
And obviously, human, real.
Yeah, so we've got that down. But then you have all these like screens here with holograms, like this bend, like curved screen. I know LG does curved screens now, but we're not quite there yet.
No.
So all that stuff, definitely CG, because you can just, you make some graphics, you put it on top. Like most of the time they even have like screens on the set. They just make some hologram like stuff and then they just fit it perspective wise to the screen because it's just a lot easier. At the time when they shoot, they probably don't have a lot of this stuff figured out. They just need the acting from the actors and then they want to get them, done.
Yeah, and the holographic stuff is often done by a separate company because it's so specialized. If you're a VFX artist and you know everything about Houdini, it doesn't mean you know anything about doing like a graphical design.
No.
It's a whole different thing.
Yeah, it's basically like 2D motion graphics that you just slap on top, and it takes a long time and it's often super complicated, and most of the time it doesn't make sense.
No,
like it's just something cool.
I'll also assume here, if you look at his arm with the holographic stuff, I think that's the real wireframe from the model.
Yeah,
because why wouldn't it be? I mean, it's not that that's a big secret. So yeah, there you can probably see how the model is made if you want a little secret.
And then we weren't quite sure about the background. Like I think for stuff like this they would use sets. But this could be a 3D model set like we talked about.
Honestly, it could be anything.
And then maybe it's a real set where they cast it based on a 3D model or something. You don't really know. But as far as this shot is concerned, like Peter Holland, is that his name?
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland could be the only real thing in the shot. But I think like he's real, the background is real, and then they did like all the hologram stuff on top.
Yeah.
This shot here. Next to the Tower of London, was it?
Yeah, Tower of London.
Yeah, like I looked at this aerial shot, I was like, oh yeah, London. And he was like, Tower of London. I have no idea. I was there like once, maybe. So. But one cool thing, obviously, so here there's a plane that blows up, this sci-fi space plane in the middle of London. Can't do that.
No.
So
right next to an old, like 1,000-year-old castle.
Yeah, so they probably wouldn't do that. Now, the reason they're filming in London is probably 100% because of tax incentives. So we get that out of the way. That's usually why they film in certain locations, and they always have to show specific things like Tower of London, Tower Bridge,
Big Ben, the Shard.
Yeah,
it's always like that. Particularly if you watch James Bond. All the James Bond movies is essentially tax incentive the movie, and tax incentive means that the studio is getting either a tax rebate or they get money from the government to shoot there. Yeah. And the reason the governments do that is because it increases tourism like a lot.
Yeah,
like Iceland has so much of it. So just like going back to James Bond, like suddenly an opening shot in Mexico City, then we're going to the Alps, and then there's a shot in London, and then Los Angeles and Vancouver for specific reasons.
For not very no specific reasons. But you have like, in terms of CG and real stuff, obviously plane and explosion, that's pretty fake. But these 4-5 trees, I would say are also, if they are there, then they've been replaced with CG because they interact with the light. There's sim on top when the explosion happens. This tree out here and this tree out here, that could very well be real. I don't know.
So from memory, I think all the trees here are fake. But
So-
particularly the ones which are being blown up.
Yeah.
Because I think this shot would be kind of boring without trees.
Yeah, it's just concrete.
Yeah, exactly. So they're like, oh, add some green to it.
Yeah, and it's not that hard.
And even if the trees where it blows up would be real, you would definitely have to model up some proxies.
Yeah.
Because you can see the light is affecting it.
Yeah.
But honestly, you would probably do them in CG anyway because it would have to react to the explosion.
It's so much easier to just do it in CG. So if there are trees here, that would actually make it harder.
Yeah.
Because then you have to like replace all of this in the plate, and yeah, that would actually make it a lot harder.
Yeah.
Then we have the elementals that show up in the trailer. Here's a water one. This is from Venice, probably another tax incentive, where you would have a real plate from Venice, and then you would have water sim on top. You would have CG boats, and all of this here you would have to build proxy models to match the set because you want the water to interact with it. You want light effects, all the sims like this. Is not a river in Venice?
Yeah, it's just the canals.
Yeah, all of that has to be CG water because it moves. Maybe some of the stuff out here is still like the real plate, but then they have the CG water on top.
Yeah, and you definitely could do this fully CG, but the fact that you have, again, photographic truth, so much easier to do it.
And another shot from the elementals here. This is an interesting one. I did for the new Harry Potter film, I did one of the dragons. I think it's like they're all the same dragon or something. And that's kind of the same thing as this. You have a dragon that's on fire, and here you have a man that's covered in water. And it's like what you would do here is that you wouldn't necessarily have a crazy detailed mesh underneath. You'd need something that has big defined shapes, because as soon as you put any kind of sim on top, everything in the model just disappears. Most of the time you probably wouldn't even show the model. The model only exists so that FX has something to generate from.
Yeah, exactly. The model would be quite simple and pretty much no textures on it.
And then, like, I would assume real plate or something, and then they just throw in a little sim man. Now this shot, tax incentive, the screenshot, where this is like every effects artist's wet dream. You've got like crazy twisters with water and lava that's everywhere. You've got lightning. You have like CG water. Everything here is CG. Maybe they have something that's from a real plate, like this tower here. Maybe the shard was shot somewhere and then just comped in. Usually that's what happens.
Yeah.
If you need something in the background, there's no reason to frame the perfect shot where you can just shoot reference from somewhere, cut it out, and then just comp it in.
Yeah, and sometimes as well what you can see is, I think in this case, it actually, the location or the geographical location of this actually makes sense. But a lot of times there will be like, then Big Ben is in the background and Big Ben is right next to Tower Bridge, which is in reality like a 45-minute walk. But
just thinking about it, I don't know how the elementals, now they're in London? They were in Venice before? I don't know.
About it. They got tax incentives. So.
Yeah, tax incentives.
But also this shot here is interesting because I think this shot here looks terrible in still. Yeah. But maybe this works quite well in motion. That's often how it works.
When you have stuff that just moves around like crazy, oftentimes you don't really analyze frame by frame what it looks like. You just go, oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah,
like for instance, the tower that we see to the left, I think it looks really low res and it's missing a lot of details. Yeah. Now some of that could be YouTube compression, but also some of it could be that they were like, look, we have a full effects shot. Let's make some proxy models, and it's probably going to be covered with effects most of the shot. Yeah, and let's just deal with it.
It kind of looks like, so I'm not really sure what happens here, but it kind of looks like this is also about to be destroyed.
Yeah,
like he's very much walking through this. So yeah, I mean it has to be full CG.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, obviously it's a tricky shot because you've got a lot of stuff that happens. Houdini's working overtime here to to produce all of this. It's pretty crazy effect actually.
And what you would also do as well when it comes to these kind of shots is a standard shot, which is full CD. You do all the assets, and then you do textures from them, you do look at all that kind of stuff. But for a shot like this, you might have a DMP department or digital matte painting, where you build up a quick proxy geo, and then you simply project the plate on top of it.
Yeah.
And then you get a lot of stuff for free, like you get some nice lighting into it. The shading is already kind of done, and you might do this in Nuke directly, and you can do a lot of stuff with projections right in post.
And we have this, another one of the elementals, where again now we're back to Venice, and I don't know, I don't really have a lot to say about this guy.
He does look really cool.
Yeah, it's just made of lava and fire and wants to kill people. So you've got a real plate with a full obviously full CG character on top. There's no guy in a suit or anything here. And for this kind of stuff, like he's made out of this rock kind of stuff, you would have a rig, basic deformation. I don't see any reason to have any kind of sim on top for like sliding or movement. You would have obviously lava and fire sim on top, so that kind of takes care of all the secondary movement and animation, I think.
It's also tricky, if we were to mocap something like this. Obviously, you can mocap something like Spider-Man, but doing this might be tricky because the proportions are so different. Like you will have to move the shoulders and the head placement, and everything is just going to be offset. So I can imagine this here is hand animated. They definitely have reference, but I don't think you would use mocap for something like this.
No, probably not. And then last shot of Fire Elemental. Yeah, he's just angry and explodes. It's kind of the same thing, There's not a lot different here. You have a real plate behind him from Venice. There's another shot, I think, where there's like people in front. Obviously, real plate people as well. And then he explodes, and then he's on fire. So, yeah. I think that's about it. That's all the screenshots we took from the film. Or the trailer. It was a pretty cool trailer. I'm excited for a new Spider-Man film. I'm always a big fan of Spider-Man, as you might be able to tell from the recent content. So
and now he's in Europe.
So I think that wraps it up for this VFX breakdown. Let us know if this is something you would like to see more of. We're kind of experimenting with the format a little bit here, figuring out what some cool new content we can deliver to you guys. So make sure to leave a comment down below, like and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you get notified every time we put out a new video.